much for joining us today for this Wednesday workshop. We're bringing something kind of special to you today. We're going to do a little bit of open kind of round table. We're all in different places, but I'm picturing you guys surrounding me right now. We're going to do a little bit of open discussion on one of my favorite topics to talk about. And it's actually one of my least favorite topics to talk about for most of my journey, because I was living in such shame and honestly just absolute ignorance and like, oh, I'm not going to admit this. Oh, I'm just going to pretend this isn't a thing. And that went on for most of my journey, up until about 2 years ago when I really had to come to terms with the fact that, Aaron, you are in recovery from some things. And once you start seeing your journey and your process as recovery, instead of just making yourself do things, making yourself work out, making yourself eat healthy, but really you're on a journey of recovery. So I started embracing that in my own journey of just embracing that I'm on a recovery journey. And it made me feel a little icky at first. It made me feel like there was something wrong with me, like there's something wrong with admitting that there's something going on that I might need a little bit of help with. Like there was some shame in that. But every single time it always came back to the shame was there because the secrets were there. And once I started shining my flashlight on all of these lies and shame things in my life, I really started walking in more healing and freedom from it. So today I have some amazingly bearded, handsome men on with me, and we're going to be talking about food addiction. And we're calling this podcast The Confessions of Recovering Food Addicts. And that's going to be our topic of today's workshop, is food addiction. And I want to invite you guys to go to these places with us. Some of you might not be struggling with these things. And some of you might be very aware that you are. And some of you might, by the end of this podcast, realize, oh gosh, hey, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. Like it might be a thing for you. And if it is, I want to let you know there's no shame at all in any of these things. The only shame I feel is keeping it hidden. Right. So boys, why don't you go ahead and hop on with me? We're going to start chatting. I'm going to start this off by asking you each. And Kevin, why don't you go first? Was there a moment for you where you realized that this was something that you were struggling with, that food addiction was absolutely a thing for you? And was there a process that you had to go through to get to that?
I mean, I come from a long line of food addicts, and so I always try to look back and figure out when was it really. I'd say the big kickoff and the big thought for me when it really started was probably my senior year in high school. I had a group of friends, and we got done with choir, and we'd go out and eat lunch outside every day. So I was fast fooding it every day for an entire school year. Before that, it was just eating more than I should have. So yeah, there was probably a bigger calorie intake, but again, that was when I realized that I love food, but it wasn't a healthy relationship. And as I got older, it just got more and more out of hand. When I was working at Applebee's, when I was 18, 19, going to college, I was eating fast food or eating, Applebee's every day of the week. And for me, it emotionally, it started when I realized that food was never telling me no. It's always been the thing that has never rejected me, and I can eat whatever I want, and it's fun when being the bigger guy that you can take down a Velociraptor burger at the bar, or you can eat 30 wings in less than 30 minutes, and you're doing all these food challenges because you're the big guy and you can eat that much food. And that was a little bit of an acknowledgement, but it definitely for the wrong reason. So
definitely. So when you were in high school is when it started for you. And when you started realizing it was as you got a little older and it started affecting you and you realizing that. Okay. What about you, Brandon? When was there a point where you came to terms with it?
Actually acknowledging food addiction probably didn't happen until my late adult years. I didn't even know food addiction was a thing. I mean, science hasn't, had just recently proved it up till 10 years ago, and it was more of a, just overeating at that point. You're just an overeater. I remember being in junior high. My dad was working nights. The reason why I remember that is because we've had this conversation as a family where my dad kind of felt guilty a little bit because there was never any regulation from him on what the kids ate at home. However, my sister was never overweight, so it wasn't his fault. It wasn't my mom's fault. It was my fault. I'm the one that kept pounding down the food. I remember taking down a whole box of fish sticks with ranch dressing, or tartar sauce, and I mean we're talking probably 1,500 to 2,000 calories for a junior hire. Full foot long sandwiches from Subway, fully loaded to the gills, and that was okay. That was normalized. And that's kind of when I really developed the love for food and getting that dopamine addiction fix at that point. I, like Kevin, have had many instances where I was enabled by friends, by family. In high school, we'd have eating competitions at Lambert's on who could eat the most. We would go to White Castle, who can eat the most sliders, and even today, there's sometimes where I find myself in these areas where it's all you can eat, and it's normalized to go ahead and pound as much as you can. And yeah, I mean it's just being a food addict is normal nowadays, and it's not supposed to be. So I would say technically I acknowledged it in my adult years, but I definitely started way back when I was in junior high.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm hearing a couple of the same things from both of you guys. And it's definitely a point I want to address. And that's being the big guy, the funny big guy, where you're like, it's almost like overcompensating your personality. I did the same thing as a food addicted woman. I was always so much personality, and hopefully they didn't notice how big I was. That was a very big part of my life, my entire 20s, honestly, up until 32 years old, was me being very, very big, but very, very bold and super duper helpful, super duper funny, making all the jokes. I can take it. I can take it. I can take it. Talk to me a little bit, Kevin, about that with you. And is that something that you're actively trying to walk out of being that and identifying with that? And Brandon, I'm going to ask you the same question once he's done.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time that I jokingly told a kid, if you're going to keep picking on me, then I'm just going to sit on you. If you're going to keep making fun of me for my size, then I'm going to use it to my advantage. So I'll pin you down to the ground, and then I'll just sit on you, and then, this is over. I mean, yeah, I've always been insecure in how I looked, so I thought I'll overcompensate with my personality. It's kind of that Chris Farley thing too. I mean, him, Kevin James, those are kind of my big guy heroes as far as they're the big funny guy. And if people didn't look at me and go, oh, he looks really cute today, or he looks really good today, then at least he's hilarious and he's funny and he's got a great personality. And he'll make you laugh no matter what. Even when I was waiting tables at Applebee's, it was my goal every time I left a table was to make sure they were smiling or that they were laughing and having a good time. When even at 40 years old and 140 pounds down from my heaviest weight, I still feel weird when somebody goes, oh, you look really cute today, or you're looking really good today. Or I had somebody today at work, they're like, you look like you've lost some weight since the summer. And I'm like, well, about 10 pounds, but it just looks like your whole body's changing. And you've said it several times too when I see you at church, and you're like, hey, you look completely different than what you did when you started this. And I'm like, I'm glad I look different, because there's days I definitely don't feel different.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of trying to overcompensate with the insecurities in the way that I feel like I look, with being that big boisterous personality that people want to be around, because that was the only good quality that I had that I felt like I could bring to the table.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, and that's another aspect of it as well. As we go through it's a very long process of it. Like a drug addict, someone trying to get off of drugs, they might not feel that great halfway through detox, but I guarantee you their face is less sunken in. Like the people around you can see those things that you might not be able to see because you're still so like we can still so violently be turning and going through turmoil with these addictions, and food is something that we have to live. So it's really super sucky and not fair. All right, babe, same question to you, Brandon.
So being the big guy, that is like, I can't tell you how many times I've been called that. Hey, big guy. Hey, what's up, big guy? Or big guy. I had a couple of nicknames growing up that one of them was kind of fun and doting, and I was known as Biggity B. I actually have people still call me that nowadays when I see them from that era in my life. I had an email account that was like that, Biggity B at AOL.com, that kind of thing. And so another one that was not so nice, but it stuck and I just kind of owned it because I was the big guy, was we had like a weird, in elementary school, we had weird like ways that we talked, right? You just had friends, a group of friends, you'd have like your own little language. And like one kid's name was Justin, but we called him Scarston. It's like we just had these nicknames for people. Well, mine was Tranon instead of Branon. It was Tranon, and they called me 2-ton Tranon. And so it was like it was just something that I got used to. And even today, I'm sure that some of them probably acknowledge me as that. So yeah, being called the big guy, it's just sometimes you own up to it. Eventually you get sick of it and you're like, yeah, thanks, and it's just not very fun anymore. But I made up for it with my personality, with being, trying to be the best at most things, so like if you were good at this, I was going to be better than you at that. Right. There were some things in my wheelhouse, like playing drums. I was better at drums than most people. And so I own that. There was other things that I was good at with like leadership. So I was able to lead people, and then they couldn't make fun of me anymore because I was leading them, specifically in relation to drumline in high school. And so, just other things that translated into my adult life, where I'm like, man, I guess subconsciously I'm thinking about careers that might be able to give me some kind of a feeling of security and a hierarchy, if you will, because I didn't want to be underneath everybody. I didn't want to be the big guy. I didn't want to have anybody around me that would actually even call me big guy. And so I chose the profession of, being a chiropractor and having the word doctor before your name. People don't call you Dr. Big Guy, they just call you doctor. So, however, I can't tell you how many patients I've had that said, oh man, thanks, big guy. Like, I'm like, dude, no. So yeah, it's never really gone away, unfortunately. And honestly, it does hurt after a while. Like, you don't go numb. I don't like being the big guy. So yeah, that's it's not a fun thing to go with. I'm sure a bunch of people have had that as well.
Yeah,
it's just to piggyback off that, the nickname thing, like that's one of those things that guys do. I remember playing backyard football, and one of the guys' older brothers was out there playing, and he looks at me and he's like, hey, Tata. And we were all like, who is he talking to? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, you. Because he says, your head looks like a tater tot, your body looks like a baked potato, so I'm going to call you Tata. And so that stuck from like 5th or 6th grade on, actually probably 6th or 7th grade, all the way up until high school. And I was ecstatic when people just finally started calling me by my last name, because that meant they weren't calling me Tata anymore. And
yeah,
my mom still does it. My mom even jumped on it. She got me a t-shirt at a craft fair that was Tata Tubby. It was a Teletubby, and his body was a baked potato. And it was like, okay, now my mom's making fun of me. And and so
right.
yeah, it's one of those things as guys that we got to figure out a way to make the other, it's that one up. Like, I've got to be better, or I've got to feel better about myself by making fun of another guy. And so
Yeah, it's the
it's a tough.
overcompensating for the weight
Mhm.
for the weight issue, but the weight issue, because a lot of things and a lot of people watching this might say, well, why didn't you guys just lose weight instead of become a doctor, instead of excelling in your career, Kevin, and going back to school, instead of whatever, whatever, whatever. Why didn't you just lose the weight? Well, because there's this wonderful thing underlining it, that's food addiction and food entitlement, and a honestly a very slippery slope with our nutrition and how we handle and navigate things. So the next question I want to talk to you guys, or thing I want to talk to you guys about, is relationships. And how has this affected your relationships in your life? I know, Kevin, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, babe. Hey, we're going to get personal here. So listen, but I'll go first. I'll open it up. But we're going to talk about relationships and how it's affected your relationships in your life. So for me personally, um, it created a very big, because Brandon, I never had a food addiction issue until I married Brandon. That I will be completely honest with you. I never did. I never struggled with my weight until I met Brandon. Never did. My parents were both overweight, so I could see the future and what it held for me if with all the slew of crap in my genetic gene pool. But I never overate. I never binged, nothing like that. But I got with him. He's older than me, and I just very much latched on to him and his habits and what he was doing. So when we would have our dates, it would involve a lot of food. When we would go and do things, it would involve a lot of food. I mean, it was just food, 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 because he had an addiction. Now, do not hear me saying that Brandon is the cause of my food addiction. That's not what I'm saying to you. Brandon was kind of the one who introduced me to that kind of lifestyle, and I chose to step into it because I wanted to be with him. I wanted to marry him. I wanted to be everything he wanted me to be. However, coming on to the later side of marriage, when I was 402 pounds and realizing I have literally eaten myself completely out of who he would ever even want. You know what I mean? Like, on the whole other end of this, of like, I'm not anything. Like, if you would ask what his type was, it was not who Aaron at 402 pounds was at all. Um, and he always held his weight really well, which I think is very unfair. You men can hide it so much better than we can. Oh my Lanta. But yeah, so I would hide things from him. Like, I would always feel like I needed to be on a weight loss journey to overcompensate the fact that I was overweight. And I never felt a lot of freedom because I'm like, okay, I don't want to look like this for him. I want to look better for him. And that was a lot of my struggle with weight. And I'll be really honest now, that was why I failed so many times, because I was doing it for somebody other than this gal right here. I was doing it because I wanted my husband to find me sexually attractive. I was doing it so that I could right all these wrongs and overcome all no, and cover up all these things. Not overcome, cover up. And I realized that's what I was doing. So when I started it this time, I didn't want to have all that shame in the back of all the secret drive-through runs and all the secret eating that I would do that I wouldn't let him know about, because I wanted him to think I was trying to be better for him. Instead, I did my weight loss journey in secret for a while, and I didn't tell him about that. And I was doing it for me, and I had to really flip that around of like, I can't do this for anyone else. I can't do this for my current husband or my children. I can't do it for anybody but myself. But it definitely negatively impacted my marriage because it made me feel very separated from him, because I was very much struggling with a lot of things that I didn't want to bring to the table because it would make me look weak to my very highly educated husband who seemed to have all the answers for everything. And here I am struggling with all these things, but then realize he's got these problems too. And we need to do it together, and I'm so glad he's on board with what we're doing here and like talking about it. It's such a big thing. I'm so glad you guys are on here with me tonight talking about it. Like, I don't have women on here, we're crying our eyes out. I got some men, some manly men, some beautiful bearded manly men talking about this stuff. So It's definitely affected my relationships. It's made me feel insecure most of the time. I could never. Now let's get a little rated R here, kids. Cover your ears. But I could never like give myself fully, in the bedroom because I was so insecure with the way my body was and the way I looked, but most importantly, the way I felt. Like I felt so just not attractive. I felt so undisciplined. I felt like a drug addict is what it felt like. Um, and so it stole from me for a lot longer than I wanted it to in my relationships. Brandon, you want to piggyback off me? That sounds dirty right now. And then Kevin can go after that.
Um, yeah, so relationships. uh I was in the friend zone, elementary school, junior high, high school, friend zone. I was not attractive. I was not a desirable, partner for anybody. Um, I had a lot of friends, and I had a lot of people that liked me. I had, uh, a lot of friends that were girls, but no girlfriends. And so the ones that I did have, I did not approve of. Like it was. I feel bad talking about it now because they're wonderful people, but I felt at the time I'm like, oh, I don't want to drag, get the bottom of the barrel. I want the top. It's like, and so yeah, I mean, relationships all the way from being a kid, always being the one that was last picked, always being the one that was, um, just not looked at as like a nice looking person. I was ugly. My parents were not very skilled at dressing me well. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, I looked like a turd. I just looked dumb. I mean, you look at my pictures, I look dumb. Like, what are they thinking? Um, and so that didn't help me at all. And then I looked up to other people that were food addicts. One in particular was my Uncle Jim, which was a bigger guy, funny, checks off all the boxes for a food addict. Drove a truck, had a nice little comfortable life. It was hilarious. I looked up to him like crazy, and it was, I felt comfortable around him. I felt comfortable around other truck drivers because my dad was in trucking from the age of 12 to 16. I was driving trucks. I was working at a truck line, and I was comfortable around all those guys because they were like that too. They were all overweight. They were all food addicts. And again, they were all funny and hilarious, and they were just like me, and I felt at home. And so relationships, I just never had that. I remember my first serious girlfriend was uh, it was oh, what's the word? It was conditional. If I looked like this, then I could, be her boyfriend basically. And so I remember, busting my butt trying to do stuff like that and trying to do it for everybody else, just like Aaron, you said, doing it for other people instead of you. And so, yeah, I mean, relationships, not to mention not just intimate relationships, but friendships, work relationships, careers, you know, contacts and connections. I remember being in college and I had lost a significant amount of weight at that time, not the right way, but I did lose it. And I felt so good about myself for a short period of time that I put myself out there at risk. I put myself out there in environments I would never have gone to before and was able to advance myself with the connections that I made through that because of the way that I felt. When I put the weight back on, that feeling and that confidence was not there because it was never there to begin with. It was just because I thought I looked good. And so my mind has always been, if you look a certain way, if you dress a certain way, if you fit a certain body type, that's where your success is going to come from. That's where your love is going to come from. That's where you are going to really move forward in your life. And it's not true, right? We know that's not true. But it took me a long time to realize that. And honestly, I mean, I turned 43 here in a month or so. And, it's been the better part of my life up to 40 years that I didn't know any of this. This is all new to me of recognizing food addiction, realizing that my body is fighting me every chance it can. to keep me in food addiction state, to keep me packing on pounds. And so the relationships I do have right now, I feel fortunate to have, and I feel lucky to have.
We're all muted here. So, all right. Yeah, same situation. I was middle school. I mean, I think I had one girlfriend in 6th grade, but that was for like 2 weeks. 7th grade, there wasn't anything. 8th grade, there was this girl that I thought was wonderful, and we dated for a whole 2 weeks, and it was like 2 separate 1-week stretches. When I got to high school, my only date was with the girl that was my prom date my senior year. 4 years of high school, 1 date. I was like, boy, that's really good average. I mean, I'm doing great. It was really, really frustrating. First real relationship, first girlfriend was in college. She never saw me for my weight, which was weird because everybody else always did. But that one was only about a month and a half, 2 months. My first real intense relationship was my ex-wife. We were both bigger when we met, and this is where it all starts to spiral way out of control for me. I mean, when we got married, I was probably 350 pounds. And when we got married, we kind of settled into a pretty busy lifestyle. I mean, we were both working. We were working opposite shifts. It was about the only time we did see each other was for food. And then, you know, on the weekends. And then 2014, I think it was 2014, 2015, somewhere around there in February, was the only time that we got pregnant and we lost the baby. And she took it on herself as she needed to get healthy and she needed to take care of herself so that if we were ever to try again, that was one of the things the doctor said. Hey, if you lose weight, it's more likely that you'll get pregnant again. You'll be able to sustain a pregnancy. So she took it on herself. She worked really hard. I mean, that's one thing I will never not give her credit for is, she watched what she ate. She worked out 4, 5, 6 times a week. She tried to drag me along. She tried to say, hey, let's go to the gym or let's go for a walk. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was so depressed in that moment because from the time I was 12, I knew I wanted to be a dad. And so to lose that opportunity, and it's the only chance I've had at this point, I spiraled into a depression. I put on 50, 60 pounds that first year after that. I sat around and sat on the couch and played video games and ate everything I could find and stopped at the gas station every morning for 2 breakfast sandwiches and a giant iced coffee and then would eat 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day because I was just so depressed. And here she was, calorie counting 1,500 calories a day, 1,800 calories a day, working her butt off. And I mean, she lost 115 pounds or 120 pounds in like a year and a half. And I mean, she worked her butt off for it. So she did it the right way, or at the time anyway, the right way. She was working really hard and I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't care. I was so lost in that moment. It felt like when we would try and do things that she was either dragging me along or pushing me along, and it never felt encouraging. And it took a while for me to look back and say that was the way that she was trying to encourage me to get healthy. Come to find out, after 2 more years of marriage and still no other pregnancies or anything like that, I went to the doctor. I was like, well, let's go and get checked out for me, because she had took all the responsibility for it, not for it failing on her. And I went to the doctor and they're like, I went got my sperm checked, did this, and everything, and they're like, well, your count's a little low, and believe it or not, they're slow and oddly shaped. And I'm like, ta-da, like father, like sperm. Like, so am I, so that's not a surprise. And so we struggled with a lot of things, her and I did. But in the end, it came down to, if you want me to lose weight, I need something besides just, hey, let's go for a walk, because I'd walk to the end of the driveway and I'd walk to the end of the street. And then, I mean, I said it in my post last night, shin splints, my back had started hurting. At this point, I was probably 425 pounds, 440 pounds, somewhere in that range. Before we split up, I got up to like 450 pounds. Um, and then one of the things, she's like, I want you to try and focus on losing weight. And so I changed all my eating habits for really the first time in my life. I stopped eating fast food. I stopped drinking sodas. I dropped, I think it was 35 pounds in 45 days by just changing my eating habits and getting up and moving a little bit more. And she said the worst thing she could say. She's like, I know you're trying, but it's not happening fast enough. And I'm like, I've dropped a third of what you lost in a fraction of the time. Give me a little bit more time and a little bit more support, not discouragement. And, you know, I was just like, well, screw this. If this is how it's going to be, I'm not going to do this. So if you want me to lose the weight quicker and you want me to get that weight off so I can be more active and go do those things with you, I need you to reconsider me doing weight loss surgery. Because we had talked about it. And my mom and dad had both done it at that point. And her response to that was, well, I know that you think that that's the easy way out to get that weight off. And I was like, it's a lifestyle change. I said, I love food. So shoveling food in my mouth until I can't breathe, or, you know, Brandon and you, I mean, you guys, everybody knows this. I'm going to eat until I'm full. Well, when you're that sad and depressed and you're an addict, you're never full. It doesn't matter. I mean, at my worst, I was eating 6,000 to 7,500 calories a day. And so her thought was, you know, I don't feel like it's a smart financial investment to spend, you know, $12,000 to $18,000 for weight loss surgery for you to lose 100 pounds. I'm like, then I think it's time that we look at ending this. And so my weight was the end of my marriage. It was part of it, you know, looking back now. It was a fraction of everything that was going on, but it was the final straw for me. I'm like, here I am ready to start fighting for myself and fighting for this relationship and fighting for it. And I don't have the one person in my life support that I need the most at that point. She was so fed up with me. She was so fed up with everything. And so I was like, okay, well, then I guess it's time to end this. And so we filed for divorce, and the divorce was final in July in 2018. In October of 2018, I went in for my informational meeting at the weight loss surgery in Kansas City, Casey Bariatric. And then I went and had my surgery February 2019. And in 6 months, I lost 160 pounds. And ironically enough, like after we split up, I was like, well, you know, we'll give this dating thing a try at 400. And at that point, 470 pounds. And I was astonished by the reaction. There was times where I would have 3, 4, 5 dates a week, which was great. But then that also meant that I was going out and eating 4 or 5 times a week. And then after I had the surgery, and after I had my surgery, I'm like, I'm not gonna date. I'm just gonna focus on the journey, get healthy. I lost that 160 pounds in 6 months, and then for the next 6 months, I was like, you know, we'll give it a shot. We'll see if we'll put myself back out there. It was like crickets. Like I was like, what I thought was my biggest struggle of having all this weight on me was the reason people weren't interested, and I lost the weight and nothing. I mean, I don't think I went on a date until after, it would have been right around November of that year. So it was probably 4 months that I went with just nothing. And I got really excited because I met somebody who had been through that journey. She had weight loss surgery. So she knew it. So I was like, oh, this is great. I've got somebody who's done this, had fantastic success, knows the journey, knows the lifestyle. So, you know, let's give this a go. Well, that relationship went about 6 months and it crashed. After that, another relationship, and where I was finally feeling great about myself and the progress I was making, I have this toxic characteristic of getting into relationships where people need to be carried along. or you need to be drug along, or here I can do it. Now let's bring them back out of the darkness that they're in. And it's a toxic trait because it makes you feel needed. And the last thing that someone who is an addict of any kind needs is to be needed, because then when that needing is not met, you go back to the thing that you were doing before. And I went back to eating all the time, and I was eating everything that I could find. I was hitting up the drive-through before I would go home and then have to cook dinner. And it's still a struggle today. I mean, here I am, 41, and I'm absolutely not where I thought I was going to be. I was hoping to be married with kids and getting ready for grandkids and all that. And here I am, single, just hoping somebody, swipes right. And up until like the last few weeks, I've been really like getting down again. Again, I just turned 41 2 weeks ago. So I had my big, here I am at 40 moment a little over a year ago, thinking, this isn't what I want. This isn't where I want to be. And so now here I was at 41 going, you know what? I keep trying to make things happen. And right now I just need to focus on, again, taking care of myself, being a good friend, being a good brother, son, cousin, tribe member, whatever it is, whatever those relationships I have now. And let's see what happens. And the last few weeks I've had multiple dates. I've got one after the Zoom call. And so things are changing a little bit. This Sunday's message at church, and I know not everybody here goes to church where we go or even goes to church, but we had a really good message on gratitude this week. And I had a really good small group last night with my men's group that I lead, and started talking about just gratitude. And one of the things that Pastor Zach mentioned is keeping a gratitude journal. And so I passed out journals to the guys last night. I said, I'm going to start keeping a gratitude journal. Here's your journal. Here's a pen. You've got no excuse. I'm not asking you. If you want to make it something that's part of your life every day, go for it. If you don't, that's fine. Here's a journal. I don't care. They've been sitting there for a year. So I'll take them because I've got so much crap in my house right now. But I realized that I need to be grateful and I need to be happy for the things that I've got. And then, it's just like being a good steward of whatever it is we're given. If I'm grateful and I'm happy for the things that I've got, then God's going to bless me with those things down the road that I really need.
That's so right.
And I want a partner. I want somebody to go through this life, hopefully for the next 40 or 50 years with. But, if not, I want to be the best friend, and I want to be the best uncle, and I want to be the best person that I can be for those people that God has trusted to put in my life. So.
Definitely. Well, I'm not worried at all about you finding someone, Kevin, not because of your sense of humor, which is point and spot on, not because of your just who you are, because of your heart. Like, you have a beautiful heart, and someone's obviously swiped right because you're going on a date tonight, but she's out there. You keep being grateful. You keep putting it out there. You keep working on you, for sure. And she's definitely out there for you. Goodness gracious. So the next thing I want to ask you guys is, this is obviously an ongoing struggle when you're dealing with recovery. It is easy to relapse, just like Kevin was talking about. It's easy to find yourself back there again. And I know there's so many tribe members right now that found their self back there again around Thanksgiving. So many have reached out to me about going on a binge or eating in the house, and they're really disappointed in themselves. I want you guys to shed some light and normalize the relapse process, and how, like, I'm going to go as bold as to say it's a necessary part of recovery, is finding yourself there again, because there's going to come a time where you're sick and tired of finding yourself back there again. And that's one of the things that I have really gotten the spin of it, because I would just, every week I felt like I was restarting again on Monday. And you get to the point where you're like, I'm done with this. And you set up harsh accountability. Like, if I have like a crazy binge or something, I've got to text everybody in the shrinking tribe that, hey, I just ate my house. I ate everything in here. Like, and I don't want to do that. And that's what keeps me from that. Like, I have my caloric range, just stay in it. Dang it. Like, yes, I'll have the snacks. Yes, I'll have the popcorn. I'm not going to lie and say I don't. But a full on binge hasn't happened for me in over 2 years. And I'm proud to say that, because even in my journey, I would go through processes where I would find myself back there again and feeling like all of the work and effort I had done was nothing. And it's such a freaking lie. Like, I had lost 160 pounds at one point, and I was like shaming myself and telling myself, you haven't changed at all. You haven't changed at all. And I don't know about you guys, but I always have that little voice. You call it what you want to. I call it a demon, but I always have that voice whispering and telling me all those lies. As I'm feeding myself, it's feeding me lies. Brandon, why don't you open up this a little bit and talk about that, about how the relapsing part of the journey and the process. I want to make sure we're off here about 6:30 so Kevin can go on his hot dates.
So relapse, like you said, it's kind of a normal, it's almost like a normal thing of recovery because, you know, I'm trying to get my thoughts out from here, through here. And I'm thinking, you know, we live in such an all or nothing world where you're either doing something or you're not doing something. I know for us, you know, me being busy at work, busy at home, two kids, you know, a business, you know, all that kind of stuff. I'm just go, 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 go sometimes. And I feel like it's like all or nothing. And I feel like if I sit down and rest or I sit down and not do anything that's really healthy for me, I feel like I'm actually going backwards instead of going forward. And there's something to be said about just the stillness. And sometimes a relapse happens because we don't acknowledge that. Again, I'm trying to piece together my thoughts. One of the things that comes to mind is when we relapse, we're taking it's like we're taking two steps forward and one step back, right? But when a food addict relapses, it feels like you're taking two steps forward and you're all the way back, like 100 steps back, and you feel like you've got to make up all that ground again. And that's that all or nothing lifestyle, and it's absolutely not true. In reality, it's two steps forward, one step back. But is that really bad? Because you're still making forward progress. Everybody thinks two steps forward, one step back is a bad thing. But for me, you're still moving forward. And it's a comfortable pace and it's a doable pace instead of trying to run forward all the time. And so as a food addict, I've had to basically unlearn some of those things of all or nothing and give myself grace. That's some of the big aha moments that we've been talking about this week, that Rachel put out in the challenge today. About, for those of you that didn't know, we're recording this a day before Wednesday, so it's Tuesday's challenge of the consistency push in fall of 2022. So for anybody that's watching this, be in past tense, but yeah, there's 2 years gone in there. So, but basically this aha moment for me was the concept of it takes the time it takes. For me, being a medical provider, when we're dealing with healing with the human body, and I'm trying to get somebody from point A to point B, it's completely normalized in our industry that it takes a little bit of time to get there. It's a roller coaster ride, but as long as you're trending up to healing, that's a good go, right? But in food addiction and losing weight and lifestyle change and all of this stuff, we want to just collapse everything and go right to the finish. And that doesn't work that way. And we feel like when we relapse, we're going to actually undo and untangle everything that we just did and just built up. And it just comes crumbling down because of one choice that we made. And that's absolutely a lie, right? I don't know where that comes from. I don't know what kind of physiology or what kind of genetic thing or what kind of environmental thing that happens with. But it's not true. It takes the time it takes. It's okay to go 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's okay to mess up and relapse every once in a while, as long as you're trending forward and you don't do 2 relapses in a row. You got to get back up, back on, and get to work. And that's the big thing that I've learned throughout this entire journey, is that I don't care if it takes me 4 years. I don't care if it takes me 4 months. As long as I'm doing what I need to do, it takes the time it takes. And I'm going to enjoy myself in the process, because what what is worth it if I destroy my mind, destroy my behavior, destroy everything around me just to get into a size 36 waist with an extra large shirt or a large shirt? And at the end of the day, I'm like, I feel like I need to binge. I feel like I'm stressed. I'm unhealthy. I don't have myself anymore. I don't want that. Right. And so relapsing is definitely part of it, but you have to own it. You got to own your decision, stop making two wrong decisions in a row, and give yourself some grace. And I would say that's part of the relapse process for me personally. And I don't know if it translates to everybody else, but that's my journey so far.
Yeah. And Brandon, what would you say? Like, what are your tips for when you mess up? You said one of them just now, but when you mess up, what are your tips as a recovering food addict? What are your tips to other people when they do it? What do they do next? You said don't do two in a row. But what else? What else would you encourage people to do when they find themselves struggling again or in that lifestyle again?
Don't be a food addiction masochist where you punish yourself for making mistakes. Um, we want to have the grace on ourselves. So one of the things I've done in the past when I messed up is I didn't want to weigh myself. I didn't want to. I felt like, man, I've just crumbled. Everything's gone. I might as well go. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all the way, right? And so, boom, I'm door dashing. I'm doing whatever. I'm going to the freaking buffet, right? And that's not what you want to do, obviously. But a food addict, they're not fighting a normal battle here, right? You're not fighting just something that I'll say a skinny person, right? But we know skinny people, weight doesn't matter with food addiction. I mean, you could be completely fit and still food addicted. So, but somebody that a normal size for my frame, they would be eating a certain amount, and if they overate or something, they can reel it back in the next day and they're completely fine. They don't have that problem. Me, if I overeat and I indulge and I mess up, my physiology wants to perpetuate that. I have just started a water wheel that wants to keep spinning, right? And it takes a lot of effort here and here to stop that momentum that's already started, because that momentum goes fast. It's like a Tesla car. I mean, it just starts going and it goes, right? And so I would say the biggest tip on top of not doing two no-nos in a row is to acknowledge your mistake and then give yourself grace, right? And then do something healthy that is fueling your goals. Okay, whether that's going for a walk. We don't want to do an extra walk. We're not punishing ourselves. You're not going to go, oh man, now we've got to do 45 minutes on the treadmill. I've got people at work that do that. They have no idea that they have an eating disorder, because that's what they're doing. They're trying to eat whatever they want and then work it off in the gym. That is an eating disorder. That's not healthy eating. And so we don't want to do that. We don't want to punish ourselves. We don't want to be a food addiction masochist. We want to be kind of a gracefulness about us. And so you just do one extra thing, purposeful. Maybe it's an extra drink of water. Like, hey, the next thing I'm going to do, I don't care what it is. The next thing I'm going to do is going to fuel my goals. I'm going to stop this momentum right now, acknowledge that it happened, give myself grace, and then I'm going to do the next thing healthy.
Good. That's so good. You brought up such a good point about, like, it's almost like a frenzy happens. Like, and people who don't struggle with this, they can't understand it, honestly, because they can say all the time, just stop eating, just stop eating. Like, okay, sure. But it's psychological. It's chemicals in your brain that are firing, just like you're shooting up heroin or snorting cocaine. Like, it's a actual full blown thing. But we have the power to stop the momentum, and most importantly, we have the power to take the power off the food and put it back on us. That we have the right to choose what we put in our mouth, right, and what we put in our body. So, Kevin, same question to you, buddy. What was the question I asked you, Brandon? We went a little away.
So what would you do to somebody that was relapsing? Right.
So there's two things that I mentally wise have had to process through this. When you hear the word addiction, when you hear, a drug addict relapses, they always have to start back at zero. If you hear an alcoholic that, okay, well, crap, I, went and I had a beer, you always got to start back at day one. And so that's a mentality that I've had to process through as far as being a food addict, because guess what? Even though I binged or I went crazy or I ate everything in the, in the grocery store, guess what? I still have to eat tomorrow too. And so trying to change that mentality of I'm a food addict, I can't not eat now. And I have to start all the way back at zero. It's the one thing that I've taken away most from the group, even though I've lost probably 10 or 12 pounds and held it off, is what if this time you don't give up? Okay, so guess what? I messed up today. I got a whole nother day that starts over tomorrow. So I have to consciously make the right choices the next day or the next meal to keep that journey going. So that's where when we say addict and we say relapse, you have to kind of switch your mentality a little bit when it comes to food. The other part is, if you're an alcoholic and you're a drug addict and you're around people that really care, they're not going to say, hey, here's a six-pack, here's a rum and Coke, or here's a snort of cocaine. But guess what? If you're around people that are food addicts and you're an addict, you're probably going to go out to eat after church. You're going to go out and you're going to hang out with these people and you're going to be around food. You can't put it on those people to hold you accountable, but you also can't blame them if you hang out with people and you're eating. You make the choices every time you eat something, what it is that you're eating. I came to the coffee shop. I'm freezing cold. I was like, do I get, my normal frozen coffee drink or an iced coffee? But, when I drink coffee, it's coffee with sugar-free creamer and oat milk. I've completely changed my coffee order from a year ago.
Yeah.
When I go out and eat, I go out and I eat what I want, and then I box the rest of it up and take it home. I've made every choice when it comes to food. Now, there are times where the habits you have, in certain situations, like when I went up to Iowa this last weekend to go see my family for Thanksgiving, guess what I did? I stopped at the gas station and I still had to buy a bag of road snacks. So like got jerky, got some gum, and I'm like, okay, so far so good. And I'm like, oh, good. That Reese's Big Cup with pretzels looks really good. Let me get a 2-pack. Get that instead of getting like 2 king size, Butterfinger, and, I've got my gum and I've got my beef jerky. Oh, wait, look, there's pizza and they've got chicken strips and they've got, let me get a 44-ounce soda because it's a 4-hour drive. And yeah, you're walking out with a 3,000 calorie meal for the road and you're just going to be sitting there the whole time. So making each choice every time you eat or you drink, you just have to make those choices. I'm not a water fan, but I'll be darned if there's one thing I don't get every time I go to the grocery store is a new flavor additive to add to my water, because it's the only way I'm going to drink my water on a consistent basis. And that's not even helping sometimes, if it's, so what do you say to an addict who has to eat still and still, to not, okay, you've messed up. Guess what? Like you said, don't compound it. Don't do it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, times or days in a row. Yeah, yes, I just ate a monster burger and a curly fry from, Hardee's. But for lunch or for dinner, I probably should have a salad, or I'll have a bowl of soup or something else that, or, if you don't eat, you don't eat. But don't punish yourself just because you've messed up once. We're our worst critics. We're always going to be our own worst critics. The hardest person for you to satisfy is the person that looks right back at you in the mirror. I mean, Aaron, you said it. You lose 160 pounds and you look at yourself and you're like, oh man, I'm such a failure because I had a cheeseburger, or I had, whatever it is. And look at where you were a year and a half ago or 2 years ago and you've lost all that weight and you're like, oh, well, that guy's completely different than the person staring at me in the mirror now. The other thing, and I think when you're in that journey and you're losing weight, you do a really good job. I need to take some pictures. I've lost some weight. Let's take some pictures. Let's see how it goes. Look back at those pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my post yesterday, or a couple days ago, was my sister tagged me in one of those joy challenges. Post something, every day for the next 10 days that brings you joy. And looking at where I was at my heaviest at 470 pounds, and I was depressed, and I was eating more in a day than most people eat in a week. And then looking at where I was Easter this year and being still down 140 pounds. And, and when you do that, when you post that kind of stuff, put it out there. Yes, it's a vulnerable situation, but the amount of people that I've had reach out to me and say, man, you are a completely different person from where you were at your heaviest weight. I'm like,
Yeah.
You know what? I really am. Like, yes, the weight's gone. My mentality's better. My mindset's better. My ability to have relationships with friends is better. My relationship with food is better. Yes, I still love food to this day. It doesn't matter if I get down to 115 pounds.
Yeah, the
I'm
food's
still
always going to taste good. It's always going to taste good.
The problem is I'll find ways to make food that still tastes good no matter what, even if I'm eating it healthy. So, but that's the other thing. You always need food. You're going to always need food no matter how bad of an addict you are, how much weight you lose, you still have to eat.
Absolutely.
If not. So that's one of the other thing that I took away from one of the things that has meant the most to me is it's not the food's fault. I can eat a cheeseburger if I want, or I can eat a hamburger without a bun with bacon and cheese and mushrooms and all that same stuff that I love. But it's not the hamburger's fault. The hamburger's not climbing into my mouth. I'm the one that's putting it in my mouth every time. And so not blaming the food, not blaming my family when it's the holidays, because they've made food that I love that I probably shouldn't be eating, but I don't have to eat 4 plates of it just because it's the holidays.
Yeah.
So being accountable to yourself and being responsible for what you're eating and what you're drinking and what you're putting into your body, and then the energy that you're willing to expend too. You guys would know exactly how this has been for me since the summer. I mean, I'm exhausted almost daily because I'm working 50 hours. I'm going to school. I'm trying to be involved in church. I'm trying to have a little bit of a social life. I'm trying to be involved with the tribe. And so those moments when you can stop and rest and recover shouldn't be moments where you punish yourself for doing that. I mean, you need those moments or you're not going to make it. Then you're going to be like, well, now I'm exhausted and I'm tired and I don't want to cook. So let me go get something I shouldn't eat.
So true. So true.
That's it on my end there.
It's so good, Kevin. It's so good. Seriously. Like, we do when we mess up, when we eat off a plan, or when we do the thing that we swore we'd never do again. We drag our sad, sappy butt all the way back to the beginning, to the starting line, and make ourselves start there. And it's not fair and it's not okay. We need to, like I say in coaching all the time, we need to save our momentum, save our progress, just on Mario Brothers. When you get through level 4, you get to save that progress. You don't have to drag yourself back to the daggum starting line of this race. We just ease on back into our lane and keep going. I always say, my biggest tips on this is acknowledge what happened and why it happened. Was it an emotional binge? Was it a anger binge? We anger binge. Hey, we do. Just like you go out and anger date or whatever, and things like that, like rebounding, things like that. We anger binge, we anger eat, or we try to justify it of I deserve this. First of all, yes, you deserve to eat. Just want to make this clear to everyone listening. You deserve food. Eat your food. However, we don't deserve to abuse ourselves with food. We don't need to eat thousands and thousands of more calories a day than what our body actually needs, right? Everything in moderation. Even the cheeseburgers and things like that, we still have those things very regularly in our diet so that we don't binge, so that we don't go back into those lifestyles. Like I say, it's like tossing some sprinkles on your calendar of the month of what you're going to eat. They've got to be in there, especially if you're recovering from some kind of an eating disorder. You've got to learn balance. You got to learn how to not be all or nothing, not be on the journey or off the journey. You need to know how this is my lane and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay in it. I don't need to be over here in this person's lane because they're going way faster than me. I don't need to be over here in this person's lane because they're way the heck back there. making themselves start over every 5 seconds. I'm being my lane with my instructions, and I'm going to keep going. And when I mess up or I fall over a hurdle I'm not ready for yet, I'm going to get up and I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying to jump over that sucker, right? Um, you, boys, this has been so dang good, so eye opening. I hope that you guys, first of all, thank you for being on here and being so raw and vulnerable about this. This is hard stuff to talk about. I find it easy on this side of things, but like in my journey, you couldn't have caught Aaron having this conversation with people, right? Like, so I just want to thank you for your honest, vulnerable selves that you brought tonight. I know that there's going to be people in our tribe that take so much out of it. I know there are people, I know because I'm coaching them, but I know for a fact there are people struggling with these things just as much as I have and you guys have, and you, some of us still are, right? So I hope that you guys take these tools and you use these resources. We're always going to point you back to the tools. We're always going to point you back to grace over everything. You have a binge, you overeat, grace, and learn from it and move on. Grace, learn from it and move on. So I'm going to let you gentlemen go. Kevin, have an amazing date tonight. I hope you be yourself and let us know how it goes. Send us a message when it's done. Um, everyone text Kevin and ask him how his date went after you watch this. But seriously, thank you, boys, so, so much for this. You are both wonderful humans. I love your guts. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I love you. Love your guts. Have a good night. And Brandon, you can take us off here whenever you feel like it, brother.